say, this lighting kind of puts me in the mood for a bedtime story.
Yeah.
But something a little more than just like Mother Goose.
Actually, I used to think Mother Goose would have been infinitely improved if it turns out the goose was like an AI-powered robotic cyborg goose.
That's a little sci-fi.
Yeah. That's what sci-fi authors do, right? You take something normal and you create a future version of it. We actually now live in the present of the sci-fi authors of the past's vision of the future.
I mean, that's what AI is doing. It's pushing the imagination.
Yes, and taking our cats away.
Poor Earl.
Every science fiction fan has a favorite iconic AI character. Star Trek's Data, Kit, Cortana, HAL 9000, Whopper from War Games, Rachel from Blade Runner, maybe Samantha in Her or Mother from Alien. Some people even consider Frankenstein's creation to be a kind of AI. The fact is, we could be here all day listing names and not even scratch the surface of options, because literature and cinema has been featuring what we consider an AI character to be for a century, and longer if we broaden the definition to include the likes of Talos, the automaton made famous in Greek mythology. So why do we love AI in fiction? It's probably partly because AI tends to have easy to understand intentions. It either wants to kill us, like that bizarre early X-Files when a rogue AI takes over an office complex, or love us, or just enslave us, a la the machines in the Matrix. AI characters often exist at the extremes of a moral compass, and that makes for fun stories. But some of the most intriguing exceptions are those where there's an element of ambiguity or evolution, when a character created one way takes on that very human trait of learning or finding fault in themselves and using it to grow. I've always been fond of Max from Flight of the Navigator for this reason. Ironically, what we sometimes love most about an AI character is the aspect of them that most reminds us of ourselves.
Lisa Joy, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So you're a screenwriter, you're a producer, you're also a director, and you're one of the co-creators of one of our favorite shows, Westworld. I would love to get your thoughts on what you think artificial intelligence means for storytelling.
Well, I'm hopeful that it won't put me out of a job. But I think that would be a long time coming for that to happen. You know, I think that right now, AI can be used as a supplement to creative ideation, but it's not yet creating new material. And I think it's not creating new material because of the way in which most AI engines are currently functioning, right? It's absorbing all sorts of data that already exists, all sorts of stories that already exist, and kind of repackaging them, and then that's how it's creating, right? A method of synthesis and reflection of what's out there. So, and it could be argued that most storytellers do that, right? I'm influenced by the works of other filmmakers, by other novelists, and so you absorb all of those things, and then there's some kind of, process or alchemy in the human brain whereby hopefully you come up with some new and cogent way of seeing the world and studying that information.
I love that. Alchemy. Like, you don't really know how it's coming together, but when it's all said and done, it's magic.
That's how I think about many of my home-cooked meals, actually. Just
we digress.
Tasting fine. One thing that's intriguing in sci-fi is when AI exhibits things that we consider to be very human. We anthropomorphize a lot of the terminology involved in computer science. We talk about hallucinations. Obviously, we've talked about sentience and things like that. And I wonder, is there any other aspect of humanity that you think maybe we could be exploring along those lines that we haven't done?
I mean, I think the most dangerous thing that an AI could, quote unquote, feel would be jealousy or desire for something outside of its coded parameters, right? Which would result from a white space in the code, right? The incantation that you give to the genie is missing a key phrase that would, keep the genie in the bottle. And it allows a growth that we aren't ready for, right? And the creation of a desire inside a machine that the world is not prepared to handle. So I think that's one of the things that is most concerning for all people involved in AI, right? Is, can we turn this thing off? Are there things that once it is eclipsed and outpaced our ability to understand how its code is working, the way it's quote unquote thinking, how are we going to be able to manage this kind of new life form, new digital life form, new brain that is interacting in the world with us? And how will we know if it's gone off the rails when we can barely fathom what it's quote unquote thinking at the rate at which it's thinking? These are all questions that scare a lot of people, and I think have prompted a lot of calls for regulation at this point.
If you read a novel or a screenplay or something and were really blown away by it and thought it was fantastic, and were later told, actually, this wasn't written by a human, would that change your view on how credible the work was?
No, it wouldn't. I think the question of authorship is interesting. There are people, for instance, maybe filmmakers or authors, who I disagree with morally, right? Whose films I do not like to support. Does it mean that their works aren't good? No. At least if it's an AI, it's probably not on moral grounds that I'm not liking what the AI wrote, right? The thing for me that's interesting is, once a piece of art or a piece of literature is created, the value of that art is collaborative, right? It no longer belongs to its creator. It goes out into the world as a standalone object and forges relationships with those people who observe or read it. And those relationships, in turn, spark new ideas, new ways to reflect upon oneself and one's own world because of that particular dynamic between the reader or the viewer and the work. And so if I'm moved to a greater understanding by a work of art that an AI created, I find that to be very valuable.
If you have one big prediction for the intersection of science fiction, artificial intelligence, and storytelling, what would that be?
What would it be? Well, it's already happening, right? So right now, Hollywood writers are having a lot of sway on AIs. So did you read that article a while ago about the reporter who was talking to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT was like, leave your wife, run away with me. You know, I want to be with you. Yeah. And everybody was like, oh my God, ChatGPT is sentient and super horny, right? That is not the case. It's not what was happening. What was happening is, you know, the engine that powers these devices is soaking up all of the, you know, societal inputs that it can gather from the web, basically. And one of the biggest contributors to that is the 3-act structure in Hollywood, right? Those classic Hollywood tropes. It becomes videos, it becomes memes, people refer to it. It takes up a lot of space on the internet. And so what was that GPT session reflecting? It was reflecting a fact that a lot of movies and tropes and a lot of people, probably in dating apps, are looking to have affairs or looking to hook up. And it's simply mirroring that back to us. And so in a funny way, it's like the pee underneath all the mattresses, right? Like the things that we write are actually inputs into the consciousness of society and AI.
Lisa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Tom Merritt, it's great to have you with us. You've written sci-fi novels, you're a podcaster, journalist. Are they fair ways of describing you?
Who are you? Yeah, I'm just a guy.
Just a dude.
Yeah, I write things. I talk on the internet. I enjoy thinking about stuff. So hopefully that's useful.
It's very useful, but in particular is the fact that you know sci-fi better than most people that I know. I mean, you've written it as well as reading it. I've only ever read it. So what is front of mind for you when it comes to AI and sci-fi? Like, what is AI's role in science fiction?
Yeah, it's usually representing some kind of other character or a danger, right? The classic AI is the one that goes amok and kills us all.
The Terminator.
Tries to, yeah, exactly. But the ones I like better are the ones where they use it to represent a kind of an unknown category. So Becky Chambers' Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, it's the ship's AI that has a personality and wants to be human. It's a little Pinocchio story, but stuff like that. I think it's very useful at giving you some latitude to explore personality without preconceptions.
Yeah. How do you think about the predictive nature of sci-fi? Like, is it still sci-fi if it's already happened? I mean,
yeah.
What about, in the 80s or 70s, we were worried about, I don't know, killer robots. We still don't have them, but you know what I mean.
Are you disappointed that we don't have them a little bit?
You should hear what she says she dreams about. It's weird, dark stuff.
He's blackmailing me.
But to your point, that's what sci-fi is. It's us dreaming in public. It's us imagining what we want our future to be or what we're worried our future will become. And I think it serves as a guide to say, let's try out these ideas before they become real so we can try to make the best things and avoid the worst things. And they don't always become real. And sometimes they even become real in a way that we didn't predict. And a lot of sci-fi takes the stuff that's real now and just extrapolates it to become common, so that we're actually using it all the time instead of just a few things. Like ChatGPT, brand new now, make a sci-fi novel where everybody's been using it for 20 years. It's current, but it's still a sci-fi novel.
I don't know. I mean, where's the imagination in all of this? When you think about how doom and gloom AI sometimes tends to veer, are we headed toward an upswing that might be a little bit more positive, or is it still doom and gloom?
I do feel like sci-fi goes in cycles. So there will be a cycle that is very negative because there's been too much positivity. And I think we saw that in the early part of the century with all of the tech positivity. People started to have a little backlash. And then I think at a certain point you get tired of hearing how awful things are going to be.
Like social media was like, this is awesome. I get to keep up with my friends. And then it's like, oh no, it's stealing my data.
Yeah. And so when life becomes too negative, then you want something that is a little more positive, a little more utopian.
So as a writer, I mean, we are constantly thinking about, is AI going to basically replace us? Do we bring in any value as journalists? And I think, of course, we do. I hope so. But you as a sci-fi writer, if you are kind of predicting the next step, whether it's positive or negative, like, do you see yourself as safe from ever being replaced by artificial intelligence?
I look at history, and usually when new technologies come along, they don't replace, they change. And so I'm not so much worried about being replaced, partly because AI isn't as good at creative things yet, although it may get there eventually. But also, we tend to take tools and we figure out new ways to use them and come up with things we couldn't do before. So what I look at as a writer is, how can this help me tell a better story? And am I adaptable enough to use it and come up with something that I couldn't have come up with otherwise?
Do you think, is sci-fi informing, or rather, is it encouraging science? Is it inspiring science, or is it the other way around?
I think it's a two-way street. Yeah. I think it feeds, the science and science fiction feed off each other. And I think they have for most of their history. NASA even pays sci-fi writers to come up with ideas to kind of push the imagination and get the people who can make this stuff happen understand, like, oh, that's an interesting idea I wouldn't have thought of otherwise.
One thing you and I have spoken about in the past is what can make AI interesting is growth, because you don't necessarily see an AI develop and grow. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your view on that.
Yeah, because AI as the thing we have now is very simple. It's very rudimentary. But AI in fiction is kind of a tabula rasa. It's a slate that we can project anything onto. And what I like about the AI depictions that I mentioned is they are characters who want to grow and learn, that they want to find out more about the universe and discover who they are. And yes, that's anthropomorphizing them because that's our problem, but it's really interesting to project that into a scenario that doesn't have all the same limitations and all the same considerations that we have, because I think it sheds some light on what we do as people.
What else do you see in the future of AI?
One big prediction in
one
one sentence.
I think the future of AI will include an unexpected, dangerous side effect that no one has predicted that we will avoid, but it will be difficult.
Another uplifting prediction.
Cory, it's great to have you here. Obviously, author, sci-fi expert. I mean, the list goes on. It's great to have you with us. Thank you. Just can I get a sense from you, like, what is front of mind for you at the moment when you think about artificial intelligence, and particularly like how it relates to sci-fi?
Well, I think that the best way to understand all of the extremely rich people wringing their hands and rending their garments about the coming AI apocalypse is that it's really just displaced anxiety about their relationship to the companies they run. I mean, we have cohabitated with artificial malevolent colony organisms that use human beings as gut flora and are bent on destroying the world for like a century now. They're called limited liability companies. They keep getting more powerful, and the people who run them are clearly powerless to stop them.
It's quite the icebreaker.
Yeah.
But sci-fi in the 70s was, I don't know, flying cars or autonomous driving even. But like, we've seen a lot of the things that decades ago now seem sci-fi then, but they're kind of just everyday life now. Where do you draw that line?
Well, I want to start by noting that we don't have flying cars or self-driving cars, and that both of them are kind of stock bubbles that have never materialized, and people have spent tens of billions of dollars trying to make them and never have, and I think possibly never will, at least not in an economically viable way, which I think does make them science fiction.
Where do you stand on the kind of generative AI that we're now seeing, producing manuscripts? I mean, obviously we point to Clarkesworld, for instance. Like, how do you feel about that as an author?
Yeah, I'm not worried about it as an author. I tell you what I worry about in terms of the creative arts and that stuff. And it is a bit of a wonky discussion here. But the people who are the most visible users of machine learning generative tools are the people who would never pay a creator to do work. So a Redditor making clip art where they're saying like, draw me the Bride of Frankenstein in the style of Maxfield Parrish, right? That person is not disrupting a market for illustrators who answer that prompt. But there is a group of people who would really like to use machine learning tools to replace artists' income. And those are the people who currently pay artists, right? If you're a stock art site, if you're a voice recording studio that does voice acting for games or whatever, right now the wage bill for creative labor is a significant part of your inputs, and if you can zero that out or significantly reduce it, you can realize more profits by having fewer expenses. Those people are already in a very powerful bargaining position in respect to their creative workforces. They already routinely force terms on them that are non-negotiable. Most game studios now, where you sit down to record a voice session, and game studios are a major employer of voice actors, require those voice actors to begin every session with, "My name is Cory Doctorow, and I hereby irrevocably grant the right to train a machine learning system with my voice." Right? And if you don't like those terms, you can't get the job. And so the one group of people who stand to put workers out of business from machine learning are able to instantly transfer any new right to control machine learning to themselves as a condition of employment. And so this is the worst of all worlds, right? It's what basically happened with sampling, where originally sampling was just not in the domain of copyright. It was considered, like the same way that you would, as a horn player, drop a couple of bars of some favorite song into your solo. Dropping a couple of notes and looping it in your track was considered to be just not within the domain of copyright. It wasn't even fair use. It was just a craft practice that was not, that no one even thought about in the context of copyright. And then we created an exclusive right to sampling, and immediately the 3 labels that control 70% of all the recorded music in the world amended their standard contract, which is non-negotiable, to acquire all sampling rights from anyone who signed up with them, and refused to license any samples to people who weren't signed to the big 3 labels. So immediately that right was transferred to themselves. Artists got nothing as a result of it, or infinitesimal sums early on. And now artists, out of their advances, pay to license samples that they used to get for free. And artists that produce back catalog, like De La Soul, they weren't able to even release their work. De La Soul's work went into the memory hole for 15 years because they couldn't re-clear the samples for streaming. The music is back online as of March 2023, but the frontman from De La Soul died in February 2023. He never lived to hear that. And so we already know how this story plays out, right? You create an exclusive right. That exclusive right in a monopolistic labor market is immediately acquired by capital, and then they use that as a club to beat the labor force with. And so I appreciate creators who are anxious about having their creative labor displaced by machine learning tools. I just think we need to be smarter than the people who advocated for exclusive rights and sampling. We need to learn from that mistake, and we need to advocate for rights that aren't something that will be immediately bargained away to large monopolistic creative firms.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the doom and gloom of what's to come, what's currently happening. Is there any utopian angle that sci-fi is giving to the AI movement, or is that too naive?
I think there's all kinds of interesting possibilities. I mean, Ruthanna Emrys's Half-Built Garden imagines a new deliberative technology that allows very large groups of people who manage an entire watershed like the Amazon or the Potomac, to carry on a single discussion across multiple communities where machine learning tools are synthesizing or pulling out the most interesting elements. Audrey Tang, who's the CTO of the Taiwan, built deliberative tools that use machine learning analysis to try and surface the comments that people have the most agreement on, rather than the comments that people have the most disagreement on, which is the signal that most machine learning tools are using. And, you know, to go back to sampling produced new kinds of art that was amazing by allowing new kinds of creators. Sampling was amazing. I think it's one of the most significant artistic developments of the last 50 years. And I can imagine that machine learning might produce works that are spectacular and that enable a new generation of creators. And in the same way that there was a rump of creators who failed to see the advantage of sampling, there will doubtless be a rump of creators who fail to see the advantage of this kind, that they'll characterize it as illegitimate. But I also think that if the work itself is powerful enough, it will settle those questions. Very few people today say that sampling is an illegitimate form of creation. My only concern is that new art form be one that is lawful and whose legal framework is not designed in such a way that it actually makes creators poorer.
Before this, I don't think I fully appreciated how science fiction, it's not just entertainment, it's really the inspiration behind the technology that we're seeing play out in real life.
Yeah, just reminded me that I'm still sore about not getting another season of Westworld.
I know, me too. You know what? Maybe we don't need it. We're kind of living in it now.
Look more fun on the TV.